and welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I am Shriya and today we bring an update from Sudan where fighting is expected to escalate in the coming days. Meanwhile, European Commission President's comment on Israel have come under fire from the Palestinian Authority. And finally, we talk about German football club Fortuna Dusseldorf's announcement offering free tickets for its home games. While its military rulers continue armed infighting, Sudan is headed towards a humanitarian catastrophe. Millions in Sudan are bracing for an escalation in fighting that is widely expected after the completion of the evacuation of foreign nationals. The evacuation is currently underway with assurances of cooperation from both the warring parties, the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. According to the World Health Organization, 3,700 people have been injured since fighting broke out on April 15. The humanitarian crisis, including mass displacement, has continued to worsen as multiple ceasefires have failed to hold. We are now joined by Prashant from People's Dispatch, who has more details on this story. Thank you for joining us, Prashant. So first up, what's happening in Sudan? What's the latest?
Right, so Shreya, as we know, the fighting broke out on April 15th between the army and the paramilitary force, the RSF. Now, there have been multiple attempts at truces, but almost each of these attempts has not worked out because immediately firing has broken out. None of them have really held. We can go into that a bit later. But it's a real humanitarian crisis there because thousands of people are fleeing the country very desperately, going to neighboring countries, somehow trying to get out of Sudan in whatever way possible. Now, it's very clear why that's happening because there's a huge shortage of food, of medicines, of electricity and fuel, for instance. There's been a lot of attack on health infrastructure. We know that a number of hospitals in conflict zones have been either destroyed, or shortages and risks to the lives of healthcare professionals are making these places inoperable. They can't be operated. So there's that. There's shortage of all essential goods, like I said, and there is the threat of random fighting breaking out at various points. So we have carried some stories, including interviews from groups which are organizing relief in Sudan. And it's important to note that the neighborhood resistance committees, which were in the forefront of protests for democracy, these very groups have been key to organizing relief work as well. So because of the way they have mobilized over the past 3 to 4 years, they're in a position to actually deliver relief, try to somehow work with families, work with people in localities, and try to coordinate relief work to whatever extent possible. Also important to sort of pay attention to the fact that progressive doctors associations and groups in Sudan are playing a huge role in providing relief as well. But all this is a matter of small efforts or micro efforts, as they say, because the larger problem is the continuous fighting. We know that for instance, the Sudanese armed forces are using the air force quite a bit. The rapid support forces, they have deployed checkposts across various parts where they're in control, very risky to actually go through some of these checkpoints. So all in all, a very, a complete state of lawlessness in many areas. Equally dangerous is the fact that there have been reports of jailbreaks in which people associated with the regime of Omar al-Bashir, the former dictator, are reported to have escaped. Also very dangerous news. So the international community of various foreign countries have evacuated the citizens. This is also, people have raised concerns that the fighting might actually intensify after the completion of evacuation, because both the sides have said that, we will do our best to protect foreigners, but once the foreigners are gone, whether fighting will intensify is a very important question. There are also reports of fighting going on in regions such as Darfur, which have already seen a huge amount of violence in the past, including repression by forces associated with the RSF and associated militias. So all in all, both in cities like Khartoum and in the peripheral regions, as they say it, there is a lot of violence taking place, a lot of very difficult time for the people of Sudan. There's no doubt about that. And I think very important to also remember is the fact that there is no real kind of solution ahead. There's a lot of confusion about what might happen in the coming days as well.
Right, Prashant. And you mentioned how ceasefire attempts have failed, and there's a lot of talk about escalation, in fact. Why do you think any effort at ceasefire or a truce are failing right now?
So to understand this, we need to go back to the roots of the conflict, which is basically that the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces were both part of the military junta, which took power in October 2021 in a coup. Before that, they were part of a so-called civilian government in which they exercised all the important control. And before that, they were part of the regime of Omar al-Bashir, who we talked about, the long-time dictator. So both the army and the rapid support forces are entrenched in Sudanese politics for the longest time, and both have substantial economic control over the country as well. We know that the army has a huge economic control, and if you look at the rapid support forces, they have been involved in the looting of mineral wealth from Darfur, for instance, and even there are reports that they have been instrumental in controlling the migration flow through Sudan, and they have received money from the EU for that as well, and also indulged in smuggling, for instance. So there's a lot of, so basically, like I said, they're very entrenched in Sudanese polity and society as both political and economic forces, in addition to their military wealth. Now, the root of this conflict is also that there was a dispute between them about how the future of these forces would be, and there was an agreement in December which said that the RSF would be integrated into the army. But there was a difference over the timeline. The army wanted it to happen in 2 years. The RSF said they wanted 10 years. And that is one of the aspects that led to the conflict. The second was also the role of international players. We know that Egypt has been supporting the army. The UAE, for instance, has been backing the RSF and its leader Hemeti. So there was also those international tracks going on. But all this together brought this dispute to a fore. And right now, both these players are looking to extract as much strategic advantage before the fighting ends. The fighting will end at some point, but they're looking to extract as much strategic advantage as possible, which means that when the next round of negotiations begin, at least both these players want to be the force in command, so to speak, where they are able to extract maximum leverage from the negotiations. So I think I see this fighting also as an attempt by both forces to, one, extend their advantage, reduce and simultaneously reduce the influence and morale and fighting power of the other force, and also to sort of emerge as the chosen partner for representing the security forces in the future, with both the international community, with the Sudanese political parties. So it's so for that reason, and right now we have not reached a place where either party has a strategic advantage. So the worry is that this fighting might actually escalate also because of that reason, because both forces are now in a desperate attempt to sort of gain the upper hand. And it's the Sudanese people who are suffering, people who are dying, people who are being injured in large numbers, people whose livelihoods are being lost, who are forced to leave their homes, all of whom who are really suffering in this crossfire. And it's important to note that the progressive forces, the revolutionary forces, the protesters in Sudan have been warning about this for many, many months, that these generals were not to be trusted, that the army and the RSF were basically out to look after their own things. They had no interest in democracy or sovereignty or any of those nice words that the international community likes to talk about. But the international players kept, forcing, not forcing, but depending on the army and the RSF, the political parties in Sudan kept, they refused to oppose the army and the RSF enough. And everyone treated these two players as the most important players in the game. And that, I think, definitely has also played a part in this.
Thank you for joining us, Prashant. We'll keep following the story closely with People's Dispatch. Thank you. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's comments on Israeli Foundation Day have come under fire from the Palestinian Authority for being inappropriate, discriminatory and propagandist. PA has urged the European Commission chief to issue an apology to Palestinians. We are now joined by Abdul from People's Dispatch, who has more details on this story. Thank you for joining us, Abdul. Can you tell us what is this comment that's being criticized heavily, and what is really all of this about?
Well, on the 26th of April, when Israel was celebrating its 75th Foundation Day, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen basically went on, basically in a video comment, talking about how Israel is a vibrant democracy in the entire Middle East, how it has faced so many challenges, and how there are cultural links between Europe and Israel. And apart from saying all these things, she also went on to say that Israelis have done a great thing while kind of literally basically changing the desert, bringing civilization there, in a way, kind of legitimizing the Zionist myths, which basically were the foundations on which the Israeli state was created. Of course, this was not liked by most of the Palestinians and other human rights activists. They tried to basically, they have pointed it out, in various social media posts and in other write-ups from at different places, pointing out that this particular way of celebrating the relationship with Israel basically uh, uh, completely ignores the Palestinian suffering, completely ignores the context in which Israel was created, and kind of propagates different the myths which basically Israeli state is trying to uh, uh, basically portray uh, an image, and that basically is uncritically buying the Israeli propaganda. So, despite the facts very well known, everyone knows what is the condition in which the Palestinians are and how the occupation is unfolding for them. So, despite knowing all the facts, the European Commission President's statement was considered to be, of course, insensitive, but also it seems a political statement which basically legitimizes Israeli crimes.
Right, Abdul, and there have been a lot of arguments from the side of the Palestinian Authority and Palestinians at large. What is at the crux of these criticisms, and what are the arguments being made?
The basic thing is when we say what European Commission leader did, basically legitimizes the Zionist myth. We should understand that when the Zionist movement started, it primarily was focused on the idea in order to mobilize the masses from Europe, which of course were suffering anti-Semitic persecution and so on and so forth. To mobilize them behind their cause, they propagated the myths like Palestine is an empty land. It has no civilization. There are no people there, and we will go to a place where we will not have to kind of displace anyone. But the fact is, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced when Israel was created. There were already a Palestinian civilization which was there for centuries. And this particular myth, which Zionists created, became the rallying point. Another thing, of course, that Israel is a promised land for all the Zionists in the world, and they should come and settle there. So all these things, of course, comes at the cost of the Palestinians who are living there for centuries, and is basically kind of completely eradicates their existence. That is one question. Of course, when you say that they have made the desert bloom, it means European leaders agree with the Zionist claims that Palestine was, quote unquote, an empty land. So that is one part which basically has been objected by the Palestinians very strongly. Another thing is Israel is a vibrant democracy. Okay. We know that the various human rights groups, including the Amnesty International, the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, and others and various UN rapporteurs who work on the field in occupied territories have repeatedly said that Israel is nothing but an apartheid state. Particularly, the policies follow against the Palestinians in the occupied territories amount to be discriminatory and based on an idea of two different races. So, a political regime and an occupation which basically discriminates and persecutes the occupied people cannot be a democracy. So this, when she says that this is a vibrant democracy, of course, that is objectionable. The final thing, which is also very important, is the way she talked about the creation of Israel, that was a freedom, and freedom from what? And we share their freedom is our freedom. When she said that, of course, Palestinians have, it is completely the reversal of the facts. It is Israel state is primarily an occupation. It's not freedom. There are people who are occupied and they are fighting for freedom. So instead of saying that Palestinians are occupied by Israel and they need freedom, you are basically legitimizing the occupation, completely ignoring the fact that that is a colonial settler state, uh, and celebrating its existence as freedom. So all these things, of course, have led to this particular set of criticism, and Palestinian Authority also asking for apology from Ursula. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Abdul. German football club Fortuna Düsseldorf has announced plans to offer free tickets at all of their future home games, stressing their desire to put fans back at the heart of the matchday experience. This step is being considered revolutionary in professional football club business and has been called ambitious. The Fortuna for All initiative will be panned out in phases and is set to begin with a 3-match pilot phase next season. Siddhantani joins us now with the latest on this story. Thank you for joining us, Siddhant. So, first off, this move that's being called revolutionary as professional football club business goes. Why do you think, what are the reasons that the German football club took this decision?
Well, from what we've heard, their reasoning is quite straightforward, Shreya, which is that they believe that Fortuna Düsseldorf, which is the name of this club, they play in the second tier of the German football league, the Bundesliga. It is already, the German league is is probably the most attended league in terms of physical attendance at stadiums across football clubs in the world. So this is a second division club. They're doing it because, in their opinion, their belief is that the club is still very much a part of the city, the city's fabric, the community that lives and works and plays around where the club is based. And they have a stadium with a capacity of just over around 50,000 people, 50,000 seater stadium, where they've been averaging close to around 25 to 30,000 per game, per home game. They want more people in the stands. They want to see a full stadium because, it's one of the sort of most basic and most, I suppose, an experience that draws everyone into football is the experience of a full stadium, whether it's the players or the crowd or everyone involved. Having a full stadium completely changes how the entire energy of it, how you experience the game, how the players and the fans interact, and obviously then going into what then that club, the kind of role it plays in the lives of the members of the community that belong to it, right? So they have reiterated the fact that they are still a club, unlike several of the large football clubs around the world, which, like you were pointing out, are now big businesses. They are no longer clubs whose members have a say in their operation, and so they feature on game day. Of course, they feature in terms of all the kind of glory and the success that they bring to those who are associated with the club. But at a day-to-day level, these giant clubs have less and less of a role to play in the actual lives of the community where they have come from. Most of these, a vast majority of football clubs around the world, have been set up in areas, and they start off as local entities, right? They are built by people in the locality, and participation of those guys. Kids from the area start playing all kinds of different sport at these clubs. And so over generations, they build relationships with local communities and form a part of all aspects of life in that community. And we've seen this, across the board around the world. And at a time when what is happening increasingly is that as the popularity of football as a sport grows, and these mega businesses kind of take over how at least the successful end. They win all the trophies, they have all the best players and all of that. What happens is that local communities, working people particularly, get priced out of football completely. So you end up watching on television, and your only connection with the club is through what you're watching on TV. So me sitting here in New Delhi can claim to be as much of a fan of a Real Madrid or a Barcelona in Spain as anyone else in Spain who's sitting and also watching it on television or on the internet. Right. So unless that club really has a part to play, I'm in the neighborhood, it becomes kind of irrelevant. And in that sense, from a business perspective, these guys are turning it around and saying that ticket sales are not fundamental to how we operate, and that's not how we will choose to make money. We will give this to the fans, and of course, they'll start it out in a phased manner. Next season, they will have 3 matches only in the entire season, which will be free to spectators. But the hope is that this model, with partnerships from their sponsors, etc., they'll be able to build on it. And over the course of maybe a couple of seasons, all of their home games will eventually be free to anyone who wants to come. Of course, subject to limitations on attendance at the venue.
Right. And also, Siddhant, the football club has expressed hope that other football clubs will, follow in this step, and probably it will have effect on how the game is played. What do you think is going to bring? I mean, what are the first few changes that are likely to be expected from something that's like this happening?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is very optimistic and I think very wishful thinking, given how football business is structured today and how big of a, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. We talked during the World Cup of how many billions of dollars are spent on this sport on an annual basis. So, and also with this kind of overseas ownership model that has come in of football clubs, it's become a lot more challenging to bridge the gap often between those who own the football clubs and those the communities that they are meant to serve first. The real communities I'm talking about, those who are on the ground, the actual people. So I'm not sure what kind of revolution this might bring about in the longer run. But at the very least, it provides a different kind of model to clubs that don't have the kind of massive funding, either based on petrodollars or based on the sale of some star player to a big club or any of that. They might provide these kind of slightly smaller clubs the ability to work out different models of sustainability, which allow the club to do its core job, which is probably to put out a professional football team, but also over time to increase the engagement with members of the club, right? Which can then later on serve to fulfill the same needs that the club has, which is essentially to buy players, to improve its facilities, to provide training and coaching to the next generation, to young players, and to develop those talents, right? So if those are your basic aims as a football club, and not to necessarily post a profit of billions of dollars and pay dividends to your shareholders and things like that, then essentially what they are saying is that there are models available, there are ways available in which by bringing together everyone who participates in this club structure, you can actually not just survive but also thrive, grow, and improve the quality of the relationship that you share between everyone who is a part of this ecosystem essentially that they are trying to develop, where they believe that match day ticket sales themselves are not necessarily the foundation on which the financial viability of that whole structure is based. So they will, of course, look at other ways to get money, and part of being a member of the club is also contributing financially to it. Those of us who are members of any kind of organization will also relate to that. But it doesn't mean that you're just paying for a ticket. Maybe you are buying a shirt instead. Maybe you are, helping to fund youth activities. Maybe you are helping to fund a women's team that the club is starting to bring up. So many different ways in which I think they will seek to engage the community, and in exchange, the club will end up giving free match day experiences, which I think they will definitely be full in terms of demand, if not oversubscribed. So in terms of getting bodies into the stadium, introducing young people to the sport, and creating that fundamental connect between people who watch and people who play the sport. Being in the stadium and experiencing the sport there is fundamental to that entire process. So in that sense, this seems like a winning move to me, at least. We'll see how the experiment pans out over the course of next season.
Thanks for joining us, Siddhant. And that's all we have for today's episode. For more such stories, keep watching peoplesdispatch.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.